Okay, prenatal. So, first of all, pregnancy is not an injury. Okay.
First of all, anything you were doing before you got pregnant, you can continue.
Yes, feel free to jump in anytime. So, yes, pregnancy is not an injury, and what you did before pregnancy, you can continue to do afterwards. I think there is a heightened, I was really lucky when I did my yoga teacher training that the woman who ran the prenatal section of our course was like, had like 3 kids, and she's like, let your belly hang out. She's like all about the movement and like empowering women and being super strong. In marked contrast to, I think, a bit of the fear culture that there can be around pregnancy. Because we are living in a world where people are super stressed and hey, miscarriages happen, I feel like, at least when I started, maybe this has shifted now a little bit, but when I started teaching yoga, it was all like, oh, what are we gonna do that's gonna be dangerous? And it's like, for a healthy pregnancy, we don't do anything in the yoga practice that, in general, inversions might be a little bit of an exception, but we don't do anything in the yoga practice that you wouldn't do like at the supermarket. Oh, hey, I dropped something, let me go down and get that. You know what I mean? So, the yoga, what's really interesting about yoga is that a lot of women who have never done exercise before, like they get pregnant and they're like, I should do yoga. So in that case, it's less about them being prenatal students and more about them being new students too, right? Where it's kind of like, okay, how do I take care of this new student in my class? And yoga is beautiful because it encourages mindfulness and a connection to the body that we don't get sometimes in other fitness modalities where we're actually taking time and breathing and de-stressing the body. So it can be really wonderful. So we're going to go through in this section, we're going to go through just some of the changes that most women experience when they're going through pregnancy. Again, and they're not injured, but it's in a similar way to say, let me understand what some of the common changes are so that if a woman comes into class, I feel empowered to offer her common sense modifications and variations that might serve her practice and her experience. You know, yeah, so to me, I get very excited when pregnant women come into my class. I get excited. I'm like, yay! I'm like, yay, congratulations, so glad you're here. Because the communication can sometimes be, what can't I do? What's not safe? And instead, I think we can foster an environment which is really welcoming. So, okay, like bottom line, if someone has a high-risk pregnancy, or there's like, they have a history of miscarriage, infertility, this kind of thing, yeah, they should check with their doctor. They should get cleared. They probably are. This is probably like a big deal for them, right? But then you want to make sure that, you know, that they're cleared basically to come to a yoga class, right? Yes. So, but for the vast majority of women who come into the classroom, they're just excited to be there and move their bodies, especially as their bodies like do all these crazy, weird, wild things. So it's exciting. So, all right, we're going to look at some of the major physiological changes that happen with prenatal students so that we can create common sense modifications that support them in all stages of their pregnancy. So who are your prenatal students? Some of them will never have done yoga before, and some of them will have been taking yoga every single day. There is a wild range. So again, the question when I have a prenatal student in my class isn't so much, oh, hey, tell me about your pregnancy. It's like, hey, have you done yoga before? Tell me about your practice. You know, what's going on? So in general, we divide pregnancy into 3 trimesters, 1 to 3 months, 4 to 6, 7 to 9. And there are generally some things that happen in each that are worth kind of noting. Although I imagine there is a wide range in terms of what happens from woman to woman, and every pregnancy is different. So gestation averages 40 weeks, and feel free to jump in here if I say anything that's out of date. So in the first trimester, moms tend to be, we have moms in the room, tend to be exhausted. They're like growing a new organ inside their body to support this little fishy tadpole that's in there. Like they're growing this placenta, it's amazing. They come in, I'm like, how are you doing? They're like, I'm so tired. I'm like, great, you can like do Shavasana the whole time if you want to. Great, wonderful, encourage rest as needed. First trimester is often the riskiest. It's why women tend not to talk about their pregnancy until they hit about 12 weeks. So, a sensible yoga class doesn't put mamas at risk, but at-risk mamas should exercise caution in all of their physical endeavors. Okay. Hormones may be making them nauseous. They might be coming in and saying, is this true? Here's a good thing, okay. People say morning sickness. My ladies are like, I'm sick I feel nauseous all the time. It could be, it's not just in the morning, right? That's just when the men noticed it because they were home. That's what I was.
Sometimes for some people it's worse, and mainly because if you keep small amounts, like eat small frequent meals, right?
Yeah.
You've gone the whole night without eating usually. Well,
and so.
in the morning was maybe worse, but yeah, it's all.
Can be. So in the second trimester, just as a general brush stroke, first trimester, they're often tired, growing a placenta, maybe nauseous. Second trimester is usually when they get better energy. And so then we have the implications of, oh, you're growing a baby and you're getting bigger and your blood volume is increasing. Third trimester, they're getting big. And so that's going to be the primary thing. There's also some hormonal changes that we'll look at that may implicate the practice as well. So the major changes are hormonal, they affect the circulatory system, and they're physical. So we're going to look at each of these individually. Hormonal changes. Morning sickness, progesterone, relaxin. So, morning sickness. Yes. Some mamas also, what can happen? Progesterone keeps the uterus and the smooth muscles relaxed, but it relaxes the smooth muscle in the body, which can also cause things like heartburn. Also, you get a big baby in there eventually, that can increase heartburn kind of stuff. So if you feel sick, so the implications for Asana as a teacher is like, if a mama has morning sickness, encourage her to like take care of herself, that it's okay to rest. It's okay to like take a time out. If they're having something like acid reflux, then being in a forward fold might really bug them, right? Because maybe that's increasing that feeling of heartburn. If inversions are uncomfortable, they can stay upright. So it's basically about giving permission for them to do what honors their experience the most. We're going to discuss a hormone called relaxin. So relaxin loosens the connective tissue in the body in preparation for birth. But this can show up early. And it affects all the connective tissue in the body. It doesn't just say, oh, let's release the connective tissue around the sacrum and the pubic symphysis. It's like, no, everything gets looser. So mamas may notice that they're more flexible than they used to be. Now, this isn't a time to decide that it's great to develop your full splits. Like, let's not capitalize or go overboard with the fact that I'm looser here. Other implications for having looser connective tissue means that, hey, I'm wobblier. My balance isn't as good. I try to go upside down too, and in addition to being bigger and whatever, I might feel literally less steady in my joints. So one thing that we can do is encourage mamas to cultivate stability, right? To take their feet a little wider, to make sure that they feel well balanced. Kind of the common sense things that you would say, like if you feel unsteady, take a wider stance. You don't have to be in a tightrope here. Take your feet hip distance apart. Give yourself a little bit more room. Use props. Use the wall to balance rather than feeling you have to do everything in the middle of the room. Rather than doing your deepest stretch ever, like maybe back off a little bit. You don't need to do, again, you don't have to do full splits. Right. Props, seated pose, stretching. Yeah, any questions? Relaxin's kind of like one of the big ones that I think is good for us to have in the back of our head. Any questions on that?
Well, just a comment is that it
Yeah.
can also make you more prone to injury.
Yeah.
Case in point, 20 weeks pregnant, standing there vacuuming, and all of a sudden my back went out. Like, and it's never happened before. So it wasn't due to injury or anything like that. It was just probably just more flexible there. It wasn't going to move for a couple of days.
Right? So that's good for us all to kind of hear and clock. Yeah, great. Thank you. All right, so modifications for this kind of hormone. Use muscular energy to support your joints. Again, when the ligaments, the connective tissue aren't able to uphold their job, use your muscles. Create stability. Use a nice wide foundation. Keep your feet underneath your hips. Use props to help you have balance and to maintain stability. Avoid deep stretches that might exploit your newfound flexible connective tissue. Cardiovascular changes, so really cool. The blood volume, the number I have here.
You said 50 yesterday. You were
Yeah.
40 to 50.
Is it 50?
I think, yeah. That number had not stayed with me. It seems high, but I think that's right.
In my notes I have 40, so maybe I have a typo somewhere. I had 50 in my head, but that's it.
It says 40 to 50 in our book.
40 to 50? Oh, okay. So you guys let's just even say your blood volume increased 30%. Let's just take that. That's insane. That's like, imagine that you have 30% more fluid in your body than you do right now. Like, so the implications for that is that, first of all, you can feel, it's interesting, one of my pregnant ladies told me that she felt stiffer. And it wasn't because her muscles are stiffer, her connective tissue is stiffer, it's because she has more fluid. So it's like a big, like her joints didn't bend as easily because she had so much fluid in her body. Your heart size increases. Your heart rate has to increase to deal with the extra blood. Your veins might be impacted by this. Pregnant ladies sometimes get varicose veins, right? Because there's more blood literally running in your body. Swollen ankles, that edema, just like having fluid, right, collecting. You got more stuff in your body. So, you know, in terms of the implications for the yoga practice, right, we might want to think about, hey, do I want to like do a handstand? And, you know, and like all of that fluid, just imagine all that being bigger and having more weight and stuff like that. I helped a woman, a fellow yoga teacher of mine, into a handstand in the middle of the room at the end of her 3rd trimester, and she was fine. Because she was a yoga teacher who was practicing handstand in the middle of the room for her home pregnancy. But if I have a new student who's not done handstand before and is like, hey, we're doing handstand, want to practice it, I might exercise more caution with that or give her options, or, you know, you saw yesterday how there's many stages to doing these kinds of inversions. Maybe being upside down and having all of that kind of weight and fluid drop down into your shoulder girdle and into your face and your head might not feel so great. It really depends on the practitioner. So, gentle inversions, legs up the wall, could be amazing though. And you get all the benefits of being upside down without necessarily having your head below your heart, but your legs are up. So that could be a great option for your ladies. More seasoned practitioners can use their own judgment. Everybody is different. So, with a natural increase in heart rate, what do you guys think about the more cardiovascular offerings that are present in a yoga practice? You know, when we do vinyasa or things like that, or do, you know, pranayama, that might quicken you up. What do you guys think? Yeah, you don't have to move fast, right? So giving permission to them that they don't have to necessarily, you know, do a fast vinyasa, that they can move at their own pace. So expectant mamas might breathe more quickly or the need to move more slowly. So we don't have to keep them pace in a vinyasa class, right? The way that somebody else might. Same thing with pranayama, like they might not want to adhere to your breath counts. It might make them anxious or feel like kind of constricted. Again, just, and it's about educating them so that they can take their own control back. And saying like, yes, because of the changes in your body, it might feel a little weird to stay with my breath calls. Please feel free to be on your own breath, right? So mostly it's about permission. So helping her breathe at her own pace. She doesn't really need to hold her breath. Modified inversions might be useful unless she's been doing inversions a long time. Yes. So in some of our pranayama, we do breath retention. Birch was mentioning that. We hold the breath. So for an expectant mama, I wouldn't expect her to hold the breath, right? I'd be like, you don't have to hold your breath. So, physical changes in the body. You grow a baby, and it starts to impact a lot of things like, oh, I don't know, all your internal organs and your breath capacity in your lungs. Like everything gets shoved up there. So, this is just another good reason, because her breath capacity is going to be somewhat diminished. Yes, and with all that pressure up, again, heartburn could be worse. So forward folds might not feel so great. Anything that is like breathing, if she can't breathe as fast, I wouldn't want her to ever have to hold her breath. So just another reason to really let her breathe at her own pace. She'll have a little bit more rib movement, but generally speaking, like I don't have my pregnant, you certainly wouldn't do, it's so loud, you certainly wouldn't do something like Kapalabhati, you know? Thanks, Liz. It's like the loudest truck right outside the door. Okay, so something that, like, you know, we wouldn't necessarily want to do anything that makes her, that constricts her breathing even more because it's already compromised. So general rule is just don't squish the baby, right? So once you're getting bigger and baby's there, Like, just don't squish it. So if you're doing back bends, like if everyone's laying on their belly in Shalabhasana, is that going to be a great position for her? No, she's laying on the baby, right? So you'd say like, hey, common sense modification. Instead of doing locust pose, you can do your back bend here. Just take it into your upper back. This is actually a really nice position to let the belly hang off the spine, right? Like you do your back bend here, that's great. We love that, right? Sometimes I'll take a bolster and I'll put a bolster underneath her pelvis so that her belly can hang off the floor, and then she can do a back bend like that, right? Ustrasana is maybe okay, but I don't like it because I don't want to stretch the belly wall. So one of the things we talked about when we did the core is that you have a lot of pressure against the abdominal wall. So I wouldn't do anything that stretches that more. So like Ustrasana or a big back bend that stretches this part of the body, no, not so much. But moving the back bend into the upper back or mobilizing the shoulders could feel really nice. Yeah. Not in a group class, but to teach prenatal yoga, I would recommend it. Yeah. Twists, right? Again, you don't want to squish the baby. So instead of putting your belly into your front thigh, right? Maybe you take an open twist. Maybe you have a little bit more room, or you put this hand down, you take a twist the other direction, right? So common sense modifications. Instead of having the feet together when you're forward folding and squishing the baby, have them take the feet wider. They can forward fold like this. Right, so like bigger, wider, better, right? Pranayama abdominals, not like constricting the abdominals. Makes sense. Modifications for supine poses. So one of the things that happens is that the vena cava is a vein. Remember, a vein returns blood to the heart? So it runs up the right side of the body and then dumps blood in. So what can happen is that if a woman is laying on her back, the weight of all of this can compress that, or if she's laying on her right side, yes, that can compress that vein and then make her lightheaded because the blood isn't getting back to the heart as easily. So in yoga, we always have people turn onto their right side at the end of the class. So you might say, turn onto your left side. I mean, they're not going to be there very long. Or when mamas are taking Shavasana, rather than laying on their back, which cannot feel good, you could say, lay on your left side. You can give them like so many good things, right? Bolster underneath their knees, block under their head, bolster under their head, so that they can rest. Or, you know, if they're feeling at an inclined position would be okay. So you can modify the Shavasana of just laying flat on your back so that they're more comfortable, right? Some women notice this and I'm like, I asked them at the beginning of class, how are you laying on your back? Some of them are like, feels fine. And some of them are like, doesn't feel good. Everybody's different. I don't know. There's a picture of the vena cava. There it is, coming back. So that's the thing that can get squished sometimes. All right, abdominal wall, we sort of talked about this. This can get split open, so again, don't overstretch. Sort of common sense stuff. Keep the back bends in the upper backs, which can feel really nice.
In addition to the overstretching, it's also the crunching too, like that, because that increases that pressure, and then you can see that diastasis.
That's interesting. So no crunches. No crunches. Now, what do you think about like plank pose, like on the knees? What do you think?
I did it, but
Yeah. Well, yeah. So go see your physio. Go see your physio to determine how to do core exercises appropriately in a way that is supportive rather than could increase a challenge here with the abdominal wall. I think that makes sense, right?
and none of it's like
None of it's life-threatening. That's good.
not going to affect that pregnancy, right?
Yeah, but still, it's nice for, yes. Right. Okay. Optimal fetal position. So at the very end of the pregnancy, baby, if all is going according to plan, kind of flips down in preparation for coming out. So one of the things that's nice for that, and this is why I loved my first teacher, because she's like this. I think she was pregnant when she taught the course too, so she's like, let it hang out. So what you'll notice with pregnant moms is that they'll look a little bit more lordotic, right? And that's normal. If we were looking at them and they were a normal everyday practitioner, we might be like, they need to take their tailbone down more. Your ladies don't. They're okay to be a little bit more like this. So towards the end of the pregnancy, this is why I wouldn't like do anything too weird with them, and they're not going to want to do anything too weird when they're getting close to the end of the pregnancy anyways. But the baby, we kind of like to encourage the baby to drop forward into that space, kind of flips on over on its back. And that's a good thing. So actually encouraging that kind of good posture is nice, as opposed to the couch posture like this, which is which may not encourage the baby to move into that position as well. Now, I don't know a lot about how much this does, but this seems like a better idea for most women, I would imagine.
Actually, there's classes that you can take, like courses about how to
do this?
to sling and do different postures to try to position.
Good. So you can take a class about how to help find optimal fetal position. Oh, and one thing too is that I think this happens a lot with your fit students, is that fit students will come into yoga practice, Pilates practice, whatever, really with a lot of engaged mula bandha, pelvic floor, abdominals. Well, when you're pregnant, you need to learn how to relax them. Like, we don't want to have like hyper-toned pelvic floors. So it can be a nice idea if you're a teacher who cues a lot of mula bandha or something like that, to also let your pregnant ladies know that finding ways to release the pelvic floor can be useful. And prenatal classes that are specifically geared for prenatal ladies might focus more on that kind of stuff in a way than you would do in a group class. So that could be helpful for them. Gotta let it go. All right. Right, so here's the optimal fetal position, kind of better, as opposed to the slouchy underneath. So this is what we would prefer to see from our ladies. Hot yoga. Moral of the story is no. More for pregnant ladies. Like, I had even my friend who's a hot yoga teacher trainer, Kristen Campbell, stopped doing hot yoga during her pregnancy. And she did all the time. I mean, your body becomes acclimated to learning how to react to that stress. Your body learns how to cool itself and becomes toned to that. But in hot yoga, you can really raise your core body temperature a lot, and that's been linked to challenges with pregnancy. So if I were being conservative and cautious, I would say maybe lay off the hot yoga. Anything to add to that?
Well,
Yeah.
just from my own experience, I remember feeling a lot warmer later on in my pregnancy.
Mm.
Doctor said it was probably related to increased blood volume. So if you're just feeling a lot warmer,
That's interesting.
come into a hot class.
Yeah, and you're hot and there's increased blood volume and you got to move all that blood around. And we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of the heat briefly. But you got to, if you're feeling hotter anyways, then why tax your system at a time when you want to kind of be growing a baby, right?
Yeah, I don't know that it's got a danger to the pregnancy, but just that it wouldn't feel good.
Wouldn't feel good.
Wouldn't have good quality to it, and so you don't want to, if you're febrile and that's when you're early in pregnancy, it can be harmful to the fetus. But
Is it harmful to increase your core body temperature, or is that okay?
I don't think you're going to be able to get to that point, like.
Where you get that hot? Well, wait till anatomy of the heat, actually.
So they do check temperatures that people.
They did a study. We'll talk about it real briefly, but
Because I tell people, you say don't go in hot tubs when you're, especially early pregnancy, and
You're more
I
than-
think someone's going to get out of the hot tub and sit on the edge with their ankles in before they get to the point of being at the temperature that's being.
Yeah.
And once you're past 10 weeks, that fetus is completely formed and just growing, so you're not going to be able to do anything.
So the heat isn't as big a deal after the 10-week period. Is that correct? Okay, just want to make sure I
You're
understand.
still gonna, blood pressure, like your
Yeah.
vasodilated, so it's like.
Yeah.
Get out of your tub, sit on the edge, then stand, then walk. or
Yeah.
To go to the bathroom slowly, so same with yoga.
Yeah.
Slowly.
That makes sense. It feels like a lot of the things that we would be concerned for with people are things that naturally they're going to feel like that feels good, that doesn't feel good. Just like we self-regulate our own temperature. If you're in a hot tub too long and you're getting hot, you're going to get out. Probably same thing for them, right? That's nice. That's empowering. All right, so our goal with communication is to really empower your ladies to enjoy their body, to take charge of their own practice, and it's a really lovely time to self-connect. So when you're communicating with them, I mean, a general rule of thumb is that if they're a yoga person who's been practicing for a long time, they can kind of continue as is with common sense modifications. If they're newer, then you're actually probably going to just treat them more like a new yoga student where you have to educate them on certain modifications that they should make. Make sense? All right, good. We can end this one.